Hi, David. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Arian. Likewise, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I'm so excited to talk about this project. So if I can just get started, can you explain why did you decide to focus on traditional wet market sellers for the COVID Counter Misinformation Fund project?
Okay, so let me start with a bit of statistics. So there are around 12.5 million wet market sellers from all over 9,000 markets nationally. So that's the statistic. It is actually more than 5% of the population. So, and then secondly, vaccination program targeting the wet market sellers was the presidential priority program before we started this Google News Initiative program. Number two, the wet markets in Indonesia, like probably a lot other countries in Asia, play a very important role in the Indonesian community. It becomes a melting pot for all types of people and activities on a daily basis. And however, despite the importance, wet market sellers are still marginalized, less educated, and underserved for factual information, especially for COVID-19 information related.
So can you talk a little bit about the misinformation that these wet market sellers are encountering?
Okay, so it is quite, when we started the program, as I previously mentioned, these people are marginalized, less educated, and underserved. So they are. It is quite common here to find misconception and hoax around the COVID-19 in their community. So we conducted, the base M line sort of survey. So we conducted the baseline survey to 1,454 wet market sellers from over 200 wet markets in all the provinces in Indonesia. And we try to understand what they believe, what they don't believe about COVID-19, as well as the vaccine, right? So what's quite popular, number one, they think that COVID-19 vaccine can cure COVID-19. And they think that COVID-19 vaccine is not halal. As you know, it's quite important for this part of the world. And then COVID-19 vaccine can weaken your immune system and you become prone to disease. And COVID-19 contains magnets, it contains chips, chip and surveillance equipment. This is actually weird, but it can boost male stamina, and then it can cause infertility, and contains preservative like borax or formalin. So those are the most common misconceptions, Irene.
So in your study, did you find that there was a significant portion of people who were vaccine hesitant?
So we found out in our study, around 50% of them. Let me look at the details. Around 50% of them are still not yet vaccinated, while around 23% of them have already received the first dose of vaccine, and the remaining have completed both dosage. So, judging from the statistic, I think, and it was already done after a year, more than a year of the pandemic in Indonesia. So I think I have to say around half of them, at least according to the survey, were still vaccine hesitant.
Got it. In terms of, can you talk a little bit about what interventions that Katadata decided to do to address this misinformation? Just exactly like what were you doing to address the misinformation for the wet market sellers?
Okay, so I'd like to mention this. I think you and I had this conversation before we even started the project, and you were asking specifically about how are you going to do this? I mean, these people are not reachable through digital channels or something like that. And yeah, that's really spot on. So I'd like to mention they are not technologically savvy. So out of those 12.5 million, probably only 25 to 30% are using phones. I'm talking about mobile phones, the combination of old mobile phones with smartphones. So not all of them are using Androids or even iOS or something like that. So so that to start with. Um, uh, Way before the program started, Katadata has already introduced the COVID-19 microsite. So it's actually trying to populate all COVID-19 data, positive rate, mortality rates, and everything. So that's before the program started. And then when the program started, we come up with the idea how we percolate those information further to the web market. So number one, we understand it's not going to be digital only. So we engage Asparindo as Asosiasi Pedagang Pasar Indonesia, or Traditional Wet Market Merchants Association. So they have 9 million wet market merchants members. This is very substantial from all those markets from all over the country. So and they are seen as a relatable party by the markets. The market sellers. So by channeling all the campaign and communication materials through these people, there will be less resistance, I should say, and they will be able to speak on the same language. So physical and traditional approach is important. That's number one. Number two, we created and we printed out banners, like real big banners. I think we distributed and posted on around 123 markets nationally, and we've been receiving positive feedbacks. So that those traditional approach were done on top of the normal digital approach, like the infographics, the articles, the social media engagement, and other things.
That's great. And so one question I have is, if someone's already vaccine hesitant, maybe pretty set in their views, what did you do to try to break through all of those conspiracy theories, and how did you try to create the messages that you thought would be received well?
Okay, all right. This is not an easy question because there is no perfect approach to combat such phenomenon. So again, our objective here is to educate the target market properly instead of obtruding them. I mean, I don't want to create. We don't want to rock the boat, basically, but we want to provide the good and real information about COVID-19 vaccination. So I think there is no other way, Aaron. It's just being consistent in engaging through all the channels that I mentioned. I mean, through Asparindo, and then saying it again and again, and probably try to find the better way. For example, if we talk 80% of people that got vaccinated are less likely to get COVID-19. 80% might sound easy for us, but if we change it to 8 out of 10 people that are vaccinated might be less likely to get COVID-19, it would be easier for them to understand. So finding ways like that we try to be as relatable as possible, I mean.
That's great. And so could you talk a little bit? So the program has been going on for about 6 months since you started this project. Can you talk about sort of some key metrics? What have you seen so far in terms of impact?
Okay, so I will start with just the statistic here. I mean, let's talk about numbers first. But I understand that this approach is a lot more important than just numbers. So platform-wise, so we have managed to attract around over 140,000 page views since the beginning of the program up to the end of September. And then, as you know, the baseline survey, we have successfully mapped the audience demographic, so we understand what type of hoax that are circulating around the community, and so we are confident to claim that we have identified most of the relevant perceptions, behavior, attitudes, and profiling the focus group audience during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we understand their hesitation, their willingness to towards the COVID-19 vaccination. In terms of infographics and articles, we have reached at least 32,000 page views and 82,000 page views respectively. In terms of webinar session, the session was attended by nearly 600 attendees through Zoom platforms, and more than 200 views through YouTube, and 22,000 more views from Facebook. And yeah, however, it's more than just the numbers. I would like to say that the feedback is really positive. As Parindo's representatives have been going back to us, saying that a lot of the web market merchants saying thank you for being able to see such a big banner, and they actually come to the vaccination program, the web market merchants vaccination program, even though through that program they are vaccinated on their own. However, by understanding it, they will encourage their family to get the vaccination as well through the local vaccination programs. I mean, through their neighborhood program. So the multiplication effect is more than just the numbers, Irene. So say if one person has 4 members of the family, you can just multiply it by 4. So that's that, Irene.
That's amazing. I mean, in just thinking about, you know, the beauty of a banner is that it's not just the sellers who are seeing it, but also all the people who are there shopping, right? So they also benefit from the messaging. And just the last thing I wanted to ask you was, you know, you have 6 more months. What are the activities? And then at the end of it, you know, what are you hoping to see in terms of success?
Okay, so in terms of the number of communication materials that we will produce, so there will be 14 more infographics, 14 more articles, 5 more radio talk shows. Radio talk shows. We are going traditional as well, so we are going the old-fashioned way with radio talk show, streamed through 100 local radio channels, like regional radio channels. 5 more webinars to go, and 6 months of social media campaign. Not to forget that we will conduct the online survey to the same respondent that we use for the baseline survey. So that's those are the you know, in terms of the numbers that we are going to tackle. However, as you know, Irene, even in the first 6 months, we actually produced more than what we committed. It's just because, you know, this is something that we have to do, I think, you know. Thank you.
Well, David, this is such amazing work, and I can't wait to talk with you in 6 months again to hear how the project finished up. So thank you so much for the work that you and your team at Katadata have done, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you very much as well, Irene, for inviting me. I can't wait to see you in 6 months as well and perform all these things. And I hope we can do a lot of great things in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Now, back to Jason for our Q&A to close us out.